Thank you.
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and hermaphrodites, my fellow slaves of the global plantation. The Vinny Eastwood Show is bad news. It's like the news, but so much worse. It's the lighter side of genocide. Just because we're being exterminated doesn't mean we can't enjoy it. Otherwise, what's the point of being killed? The Vinny Eastwood Show, where the only thing worse than living in a high-tech global police state run by child trafficking Satanists is Vinny's jokes. And my very special guest is the lovely Alison White back there in her fabulous studio. Have you noticed how, and we'll get this from the audience perhaps in the chat room, have you ever noticed how those people who are very, very studious, those people who are actually highly educated, the people who know how to read documents and digest what it is that they mean and then be able to translate them for people who are perhaps a little bit dumber, like me, you know what they tend to have in their background? A lot of books on a shelf. What have I got on the background? I've got a green screen, bro. I feel wholly inadequate. Alison, thank you very much for joining us today. So, without, as they say in Palestine, further ado, would you be able to tell us a little bit about what you do and a little bit about you? And then we'll get into the discussion.
Okay. So I am co-convener of the Safe Food Campaign, which is an organisation in New Zealand with members throughout New Zealand, but also in some other countries. And we aim to provide information to the consumer so that you can be more informed about food when you buy it. And so that's about the Safe Food Campaign. About me, I'm a widow with 4 kids, and I first became an environmentalist about more than 30 years ago now. And I became interested through raising kids because I wanted the best thing for my kids. And so I started researching and reading what there was to know. After giving them breast milk, what's the next best thing to give them? And I came around to the conclusion that the answer to that was organic food. And the more I delved into it, the more I discovered that our system of industrial agriculture is not the way for us to sustain ourselves or protect the planet. It's well acknowledged now in many domains that industrial agriculture pollutes the planet, and it uses pesticides that are created from, that's my cat down here, created from pesticide from fossil fuel, basically. And so that's a really important reason to go organic, because by buying food in the supermarket, you're supporting a system which uses fossil fuels. So you can help lessen climate change by going organic. And some people sometimes say to me, oh, but I can't afford it, especially in these straitened times when rents are so expensive and mortgage rates are so expensive, I can't afford it. Well, I raised 4 kids on a widow's benefit, and I managed to buy organic food through that time. And I think the reason I did it was because I felt motivated. And how did I feel motivated? Because I knew a lot about pesticides in food, and that's what I've specialized in. So I want to, one of my life's missions is to persuade people to reject the pesticide-ridden fruit and vegetables in your average supermarket and seek out organic. One of the reasons that I could afford to do this was that I joined a co-op and I formed co-ops and I got organic food more cheaply than I might otherwise have got food in that way. And it can be done, but it depends a lot on your motivation and how much you know, obviously.
Do you feel that we're basically living in sort of like a toxic soup to a large degree? We're having some kind of problem with the Skype here. I'm going to try and see if I can reset that. There we go. And I think that what's happened is I think the entire food supply has been deliberately contaminated, specifically because of the strain that pesticides, sugars, carbohydrate, lots of different additives, artificial sweeteners, etc. They all put strain on the liver. Now, the very first sign that you have a liver problem is apathy. You just don't care about anything. And you were talking about motivation. What can you do to a population that no longer cares about anything because everything that's been put into their diet and their social culture in terms of what they would ordinarily eat on a day-to-day basis has been so riddled with various poisons of such degrees that it has made them not care about anything? You can do anything you want to this population and they'll just take it because they literally, physically can't care. And we were speaking on the phone before about trying to get alternative media attention or any media attention on these issues of pesticides, and it becoming very, very difficult. And I was thinking just before the show tonight that the USS Cole bombing, the reason why people think that it was a conspiracy is because there are a couple of guards that were supposed to be posted at a particular time, but for some reason they weren't. And in the intelligence game, if something's supposed to be a normal way and it just isn't, and then some kind of incident happened, it's because of a conspiracy of some description. A conspiracy being, of course, two or more people coming together to hurt another group of people without that group of people realizing it was them. It happens all the time. I have older sisters and an older brother. I've been the victim of conspiracies growing up, as I'm sure anybody with siblings has been. So when we talk about the contamination of the food supply and the direct effects of it, sometimes we go after these issues thinking, oh, why don't they see what I see? I've got the evidence. How come they're not looking at it? How come they're not taking seriously? It's because they're on the take. What do you feel about that?
I think that in New Zealand we're at an advantage over some other countries, dare I name America, where people aren't obviously on the take. There isn't so much overt corruption in New Zealand. That's what I like to think anyway. And people are doing something because the information that they're exposed to, they have good intentions, and the information that they're exposed to is all one-sided. And all the years that I've been involved with various government departments, the Environmental Protection Agency, or IRMA, the Environmental Risk Management Authority, and the Health Department, the Ministry of Health, and so on, all these government bodies that I've been involved in, that the chief impression I get is that the people I come across may genuinely believe that they're doing the best that they can, but they're only exposed to, they're constrained by the system. That's one thing. And the other thing is that they're only exposed to a certain amount of information. They're not exposed to the full amount of information. And I remember being quite amazed when I went to, years ago, when I went to a meeting of the Wellington Regional Council, and I heard a submission given by a fairly junior person on behalf of Wellington Regional Council, and I remember being absolutely amazed that she was giving two sides of the argument, and I thought to myself, well, that's really great. I almost, as an environmentalist, don't need to be there. But sadly, that is an exception. So if I go into any issue, for example, aspartame, the artificial sweetener, and I listen to a submission or a report from whichever government department is dealing with whatever it is, it only gives one side. And that one side usually follows the minister's viewpoint.
Mm.
And this came to light, especially when I was on the Consumer Food Forum years ago. And we were talking of country of origin labelling. Now, in New Zealand, most people would agree with the fact that we should have country of origin labelling. It gives more information to the consumer. But this strange meeting that I went to gave entirely one side of the argument, dismissed and didn't mention any consumer right to know, but just gave the minister's viewpoint and said, oh, it's expensive for labelling, and case dismissed. And I was absolutely appalled at this one-sided discussion, and this keeps on being repeated with a lot of issues that I've been exposed to in various government departments, where only one side of the issue is given. They don't look fairly and squarely at both sides of the issue, and it really disenchants me.
Yes, I think in actuality the word is disillusioned. It means you're no longer operating under a delusion. All right, people have told this to me. Vinny, you sound disillusioned, mate. And I go, thank you. I feel quite not operating under a complete and utter fallacy that all this groupthink and all this cult indoctrination techniques are not the best thing for independent thought or reasoned decision making. It sounds more like people who are towing the line. It sounds like more like people who are protecting their paycheck. It sounds like more like people who don't want to do any actual work or any actual thinking or any processing of the information that they are being perceived to receive, and they don't question those things either. Because questioning, thinking, behaving at the dictates of your conscience is not always the easiest thing to do. It's very simple, but it's not easy. And I think people have become lazy, and in their laziness and their need for convenience and their obsession with their own little lives and not their responsibilities to the lives of others, a lot of these things have come by the wayside, and people can come in. This is how psychopathy works. This is why psychopaths wind up in the top positions of power, because there'd be 3 people going for that job. 2 of them are real good. One of them's a psychopath, who then starts spreading crap about the other 2 people, who wind up not getting the job. Who does? The psychopath. And then, as a fish rots from the head, the Chinese saying goes, that kind of perverse, corrupt kind of behavior, like in the Communist Party with Xi Jinping, a man who's never done anything, man who's never said anything, man who's never come up with any ideas, becomes head of the party. Why? Because that's what people want when they're in a cult. They want somebody who doesn't question the cult so that it can have longevity. And we all belonged in some form of cult or another. That's why it's called culture. Anybody who thinks they're part of some kind of culture, it's because you've been cult indoctrinated. Oh, no, I haven't been cult indoctrinated, Vinny. Really? You ever been to a facility where you were isolated from your family and friends for long periods of time, where you had a central authority figure and some kind of central indoctrinating kind of protocol that you had to go through? Mindless repetition of pointless tasks? Any of this? Ringing a bell, poor nutrition, fluorescent lighting, a silo mentality where if you question what's going on, you get henpecked and stuff like that? That's a cult, mate. All right? That's high school, that's business, that's politics, that's entertainment, that's all the industries that we really have a name for. Apart from anarchism, really. But I'm not sure if that's particularly as an organised entity as we speak. Now, be that as it may, New Zealand is very corrupt. And we know this because of the Transparency International, who routinely puts New Zealand at the top of the least corrupt countries list on the corruption, key word here, perception index. Now, the reason why it's perceived to be the least corrupt is because of the members of Transparency International's outpost here in New Zealand, who happen to be some of the most corrupt individuals this country has ever given birth to. And the questionnaire that Transparency International sends out every year is a voluntary one. It's the equivalent of me going, "So, bro, have you guys got any corruption down there in New Zealand?" And New Zealand goes, "Nah, bro, no, it's all G." And then sends the form back blank. The reason why corruption works in New Zealand so much is because it's not perceived to exist. It's the main point of being a criminal, is to not get caught. And the only reason why you don't get caught is if you're above suspicion. If all the people who could possibly turn to for help are the people who are on your payroll, you remain above suspicion because people will be really confused. How come the cops won't do anything to them? How come the Serious Fraud Office won't do anything to them? How come the Ombudsman is not returning my calls? How come you go up the chain of command and you try to get things done, and you realise that the entire chain of command is working for the same entity, the very entity that you're trying to investigate and expose for their corrupt scumbaggery. And hey presto, you have created a perfect circle loop where perception of corruption just doesn't really exist. People think we're free, people think we're all good. It's because they haven't become a very specific victim of this type of corruption yet. When they do, they'll see. So when we're talking about corruption, let's talk about pesticides. You said that there was some kind of additive that they're putting into our food supply that is being tested in the blood of mothers, breast milk, and that kind of thing. And you're doing a submission on this next week, next Thursday, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. So this it's an insecticide, a pesticide called chlorpyrifos. And it's what we call an organophosphate. And organophosphates generally are on the out. But New Zealand still uses some. And one of the reasons that they still use it is because it's convenient and because growers are used to it and they want to keep on using it because that's what they know. And that they don't want to move beyond what they know, the comfort zone. One of the alarming things, and this is what motivated us to do the petition right now, or we presented the petition last year, but it's taken Parliament a while to hear our oral submission on it. In 2022, a study was published about New Zealand school-aged children, so over 500 primary school-aged children in different parts of New Zealand had their blood tested, their body tested, their urine tested, and they found various different types of pesticides in it. But the most alarming thing was the fact that quite high levels were found of this chlorpyrifos, this insecticide, and that it was found at levels ranging from 2 to 7 times higher than some other countries overseas, such as the USA and Canada and Spain and Thailand, which were compared it to. And what's wrong with having this insecticide in our bodies? This particular insecticide has been banned in at least 39 different countries now, especially the countries of the EU, the 27 countries of the EU. It's been restricted in the UK and in the US finally, but it took many years there. And it's been, this insecticide has been found to damage brains, children's brains. So if a mother with a baby in the womb is exposed to this pesticide, the more she is, the more the children's brains are going to be changed. And there have been a series of studies that have taken place now, which show that the children are much more likely. They tested them at birth, they tested them at 3 years of age, 7 years of age, 11 years of age. So this is an ongoing study, several of these, which found that children are likely to have various cognitive disorders such as ADHD or one of the interesting things about chlorpyrifos is that it can change behaviour in different ways, sort of sexually. So it creates an abnormal sort of sexuality. So it stops males becoming females a bit, for example. Or the other way around, it stops males behaving so much like males but tend to behave more like females. And new technology has shown pictures of the brain with images that show distinctive differences with the brain that has been exposed to chlorpyrifos and the brain that hasn't been. I mean, this is alarming in itself, and over 20,000 studies have been done on chlorpyrifos, independent studies. But in New Zealand, we haven't done anything about it yet. Chlorpyrifos in 2020 was put on what we call the Environmental Protection Agency's reassessment list. So they recognised the fact that, yeah, this insecticide is pretty bad in our food. And in 2020, the Environmental Protection Agency put out a media release saying, oh, we'll begin doing something about it and give a timeline in 2021. But of course, then we had COVID. So that's one particular excuse. And here we are, 2024, and it still says in progress. There's no date given for the assessment or even what sort of progress has been made. So it's not a priority for the Environmental Protection Agency. You could say that it's, given the constraints of the current government and expenditure constraints on expenditure, you could say that it's become probably less of a priority than it would otherwise be. And this is one of the alarming things about it. One of the things that we did in our submission was to ask for to ask for a special fund to be given to the Environmental Protection Agency to expedite the reassessment in a timely manner, because otherwise it falls to the bottom of the priority list and nothing is done about it. And I realise that government agencies feel constrained because of the limit on their expenditure, and then it depends a lot on the person at the top as to what they give priority to. And what we're concerned about, this insecticide has so much evidence against it. More than 39 countries have banned it, and it's sitting there on our reassessment list, and it's been sitting there since 2020, and nothing much is done about it. New evidence, as I mentioned, has come to light with the New Zealand study that and this study shows that New Zealand children are more exposed to this pesticide in their body than children overseas, and that's one of the alarming things.
That makes me think. Actually, I've got a list of things here to note down to you. First of all, what's the chemical name of this again, and what are the 3 component chemicals that are actually the binding agents in it?
I can't list the binding agents, but the chemical name is chlorpyrifos.
Well, it's definitely for phos. We've definitely got phosphate, and chlor will be chlorine, and pyrazonol or something like that. So chlorine's used in mustard gas, and phosphate is from the phosphate fertilizer industry, which is where we get most of the industrial waste known as fluoride that gets dumped into the drinking water. So both of these things are highly hazardous, very, very poisonous, and also create, I think it was like 186 or 187 something different types of disorders, because they affect the central nervous system and basically everything, right? Up to and including death and all the way down to arthritis or osteoporosis, which in Latin means holes in the bones, or arthritis, which in Latin means joint pain, or fibromyalgia, which means my pain everywhere. All right, they create these names in cults to make themselves appear more sophisticated, right, in order to hide the scumbaggery and what have you. I just love the language. And what we're talking about here is something that's everywhere, right? What kind of crops are we talking about that are being used in terms of this pesticide?
Well, in the last total light study that the MPI did, the Ministry for Primary Industries did in New Zealand, raisins, peanut butter, peanuts, everything containing wheat, and the chemical sister chlorpyrifos methyl isn't actually used in New Zealand, but it's used plentifully in Australia. We get a lot of our wheat from Australia, and it comes into New Zealand, and so anything containing wheat basically is going to have the breakdown product from which is common to both chlorpyrifos methyl and chlorpyrifos, and this is a problem. So it's also found in a range of summer fruit and various green vegetables and baby food, tomatoes, avocados. The list goes on and on.
So theoretically, we'd be talking about, if somebody wasn't eating organic food, would you say that there's close to 100% chance that they've got this in their system somehow or some way, just through the variance of the diet and how many different products it's being used on?
Well, I don't know that I put it at as high as 100%, because when you buy produce from the supermarket, it's a bit like playing Russian roulette. That particular leek that you buy or the carrot that you buy may be all right, because the grower may or may not use chlorpyrifos. But there's a good chance that it could be.
Well, if you're playing Russian roulette in a supermarket and you buy 30 items, in Russian roulette, there's a 100% chance you're going to shoot yourself in the head if you click the pistol 6 times. All right, so you know, just for the law of averages, let's just say theoretically, pretty much everybody has been exposed at some point to these pesticides in the food supply. So we're talking about a very, very significant amount of people who are being affected by this. And then if you have, are there supporting statistics? Because if you're talking about outbreaks in ADHD, the thought occurred to me, I wonder if there's a connection between this particular pesticide that makes men not become real men and act all girly, and the amount of rainbow crossings I see painted around the country. I wonder. I'm just taking a stab in the dark. You know, I didn't make the rules. Go ahead.
One of the intriguing things, and I have voiced this to different people before, chlorpyrifos is what we call an endocrine disruptor. And an endocrine disruptor is a chemical substance that has an effect on the hormones in the body, and it depends very much on when the person is exposed to it. So if you're a child or a baby in the womb, there's much more chance of a change, an undesirable change being made. And it's not just chlorpyrifos, but quite a few other things that change the hormones in the body. And they do it in different ways. And because of that, we may be seeing more abnormal sexuality now than previously because of all these endocrine disruptors floating around, not just in pesticides, but in various plastics as well. There's a plastic component in called bisphenol A, and a huge amount of research has been done on this. And this is in a plastic polycarbonate, and it's not a desirable plastic. And any plastic is not desirable. Some are safer than others, but any plastic is not desirable these days because it's made with fossil fuel, and that's contributing to climate change. But in addition, there are particular risks with particular plastics because of the fact that they're endocrine disruptors. The same. So we are living in a sea of endocrine disruption, which can have various effects on the hormones in the body. And a lot of research has been done on this particular aspect. Chlorpyrifos is just one thing that contributes to this abnormal sexuality. There's a certain amount that's found naturally, of course, but I believe because of the sea of endocrine disruptors that we now find ourselves exposed to every day in the course of our lives, that there's more variance because of it.
This dovetails, of course, with the 1080 debate, where New Zealand uses, what was it, up to 90% of the world's 1080, and that's an endocrine disruptor as well. And they dump it into the waterways, including the catchment areas for Auckland City. And there's various intensities to different types of endocrine disruptors. And in 1080's case, it can be an endocrine disruptor in the water supply at parts per trillion. And because it's so expensive to test for, they just don't test for it.
And if you look at the side effects and what have you, and I'm looking at the societal changes that we're going through, rainbow sidewalks aside, but the other element is you talk about these outbreaks of ADHD, cancer. I think we have like a 1-in-1 rate of cancer. So for everybody who doesn't get cancer, somebody else gets it twice, right? Like that's how much cancer we've got here. And one 1080 activist, I think my mate Clyde Graff, he was part of the first groundwater study in New Zealand history. I think this was done in the 2015, I believe, if I remember correctly. And they found that in the groundwater, pesticides, herbicides, battery acid, so on and so forth. The way water aquifers work is they go on 10 water aquifers or 20 water aquifers. That means 10 years before the water that's on the soil gets down into that aquifer. And now, because we've been using pesticides successively for the last, since the 50s, really, when industrial agriculture after World War II really took off, we've now got 70-year aquifers that are now being contaminated for the first time. And of course, where are we going to get our drinking water from? In order to get fluoride out of the water, you need a filter set that is half micron thick. Okay? That's half of 1,000th of a millimeter. And you need to do that in order to get drinking water clean when it's got uranium in it. That's how toxic that stuff is. And because of a vagary in council bylaws, if you dump toxic waste into the water supply, that's illegal. But if the council purchases the toxic waste, that's a product. And it ain't illegal to dump a product into the water supply. I love the loopholes they've got here, mate. They've really baked their noodle on this one. And then, of course, the 1080 approvals in Waikato, they turned out that all the councillors that were approving the 1080 drops had shares in the companies that were doing them. Right? Just bold-faced kind of scumbaggery here. We've got simultaneous crises through health, mentality, sexuality, and basically the survival of the human race in terms of reproductive ability. All these things are being accomplished simultaneously by 100 different means that work in concert. And some things react with other things. Like, did you know that fluoride becomes 10 times more powerful in terms of destroying the brain and damaging the body if it's mixed with aluminium? It's things like that. All these different little things. As you say, we're in a sea of so many different poisons and whatnot. It's difficult for people to learn about this and not get freaked out about it. And I think because of their fear of knowing that something might be really bad, they choose not to listen. They choose not to want to listen. You should try talking to people about EMF and Wi-Fi and how damaging that is to them. And you see how they switch off, ironically speaking, immediately. People don't want to know what's wrong because it means that they'll have to make a choice and they'll have to give up something that's so easy and convenient.
Mm.
Sorry, I had to get that rant out there. I had it rattling around in my head for some years, actually, and you've brought it out of me. So, on the submission, what are we talking about here? This is what day is it? What time? Do you want people to be there? How can we help?
Well, I think the first thing is to make people aware that it's an issue. That's one thing. The other thing is that if people are free, you do have to go through a procedure to get into Parliament, to get into a select committee room. Like you have to go through security to make sure you're not trying to blow Parliament up, for example. But on the Thursday, the 27th of June, around 3:30, it may be a bit earlier, maybe a bit later, I'm going to be giving an oral submission on the petition that we presented to Parliament last year. And so it'd be really good to have support, and it'd be really good to get publicity. One of the frustrations that we've found increasingly, because we've tried to get publicity for this issue before and it just hasn't got anywhere except on Scoop and on our website, of course. You can read a short summary of our petition on the website, safefood.org.nz, and you can also read our full petition, which has got all the references and so on there. But I think awareness is the primary thing, and if I can motivate you to buy more things organically, that'll be a victory. If I can motivate you to grow things organically, that'll be a victory. That'll be a plus. And so next time, especially with things like baby food, and if you happen to be pregnant or you know somebody who is pregnant, give them a present of organic food. I think that's so important. And if you know a young family with children, preschoolers, school-aged children, make them aware of this issue. The assumption is when people buy stuff from the supermarket that what you buy from the supermarket is safe because it's been tested by the government, right? And it's below what they call the maximum residue limit. But that doesn't really mean much. It's just a sort of guess. They pretend that it's scientific, but it's not scientific. It's a lot of guesswork. And it doesn't take account of so many things. I mean, in New Zealand, for example, when a risk assessment is given or made on a particular pesticide, whatever it is, they do not take account of endocrine disruption in New Zealand, even though the United States and Europe do, for example. We haven't got that far. They do not take account of, and this is internationally here, they don't take account of the fact that certain pesticides cause the immune system to be suppressed. They don't take account of the fact that certain pesticides can cause different types of cancer. There are so many things that are just not taken account of. And any limit, they say that it's safe. And this seems to be a chief objective of our government departments. They put out regular reports on whatever it is. And the objective, in the case of the Environmental Protection Agency, for example, was to reassure the public that all is well. We're looking after you. Relax. Leave it up to us, the experts. We'll look after you. And that's just not true. We, as a consumer, have to be more aware. And to, when you buy food, do it with greater awareness and avoid, for example, ultra-processed food. And there's been a lot of research out about that recently. What is ultra-processed food? Basically, it's food that you buy in a packet with a long list of ingredients. And one of the useful rules of judging whether a food is ultra-processed or not is that if you look at the list of ingredients and it uses stuff that you wouldn't use in your kitchen, don't touch it.
Yeah, it's just about everything, right? And I like this whole spectrum of independence that really comes from informing people. Because when people become independent because of the fact that they've become informed about something and they're taking measures in their own life, that grants them their own agency. The thing that people normally give to government is agency. Oh, we've got an agency for this, we've got an agency for that, or whatever. But well, hold on a second, where's the people's agency? Where are they able to act and contribute and work and at making things better in their own way? Because I don't know about you, but I don't want to be stuck giving submissions to people who don't listen to the information. Like I remember I gave a submission on the I forget even which bill it was. It was something about censoring the internet and censoring online free speech and what have you. And me, as probably, definitely the most published alternative media talk radio host and videographer with over 6,500 videos and 20,000 hours of content, I gave them my submission about why it would be really bad to censor free speech and all the reasons why it would be bad. And I had a long speech planned, but I cut it down to only a few minutes because I wanted to give the people an opportunity to ask me some questions. Did they have any questions? At all? No? Okay. Planned agenda, it's going through regardless. That's the thing. These people just ram it through. It's called the Delphi technique, named after the prophet of Delphi who told Alexander the Great that he would become so great. They just tell people what they want to hear, and then they give them a bunch of options that they themselves have done. Oh yeah, give us a submission. Oh yeah, give us a petition. It has no legal power over us to change any of our decisions or anything like that, which is why you're allowed to do them. You son of a... You know, you can get really pissed off about this, and I think we should. I think that anger is better than despair. I think that what this system is designed to do is to make you hit your head against a brick wall trying to do something that doesn't work over and over and over again until you get depressed enough to stop doing it and stop bothering these people who want to do what they want to do without you. And I think it works. It's been working very effectively for quite some time. I see a lot of people who've come into the movement in some form of activism since and gone the way of the dodo. It's a thing. It's not encouraging, is it? But seeing people do what you do, Alison, actually do the research, and at least do these submissions, and try to get the word out, and try to protect people, and try to inform people. This is what gives people courage. That's what the word encourage means, to give courage. And I'm very, very grateful that people like you actually still exist in this country, because I looked at the demographics on my YouTube to find out who's listening to me, what age they are, and so on and so forth. From the ages of 0 to 45 is 0% of my audience. From the ages 45 to 55 is 100% of my audience. That is a massive, massive thing. When you know that there's actually only a tiny little section of people who are still educated from back in the day, you know, you can, if you're old enough, you got taught to read and to write. You didn't just have laptops to do everything for you and spell check and so on and so forth. You actually had to use dictionaries. You actually had to think. You actually had to work. And now that generation right there, you wait 20 years when that generation's dead, there'll be nobody left to protect the children of this country. There'll be nobody left to educate them, because all the people who are actually engaging in really any kind of form of activism are basically over the age of 45 to a large degree. And that is scary to me, that the communist left have basically hijacked the youth, and now none of them actually engage in any form of real activism, all right? For example, engaging against pesticides in terms of environmentalism, that's real activism in terms of that. Engaging against climate change, what are you going to do? Try and blow a hurricane away or something like that? There's no actual real effect there when you're protesting down the streets. It's looking at the information. It's informing people about it. It's making things happen and making real practical changes in your own life that actually do the difference. And there's almost nobody in the younger generations doing that. And that means that when they grow up and they have children, they won't teach their children either. Scary, scary stuff. Alison, do you have any long-winded final rants and moralizations to give the audience so that you have a chance to do that too? Go right ahead.
I was going to make a comment on the demographic aspect of your audience. Facebook gives useful demographic information, and what we find with our Facebook page, which is Safe Food NZ, is that most of the audience are women, women between 25 and 35 or 40, something like that. So it's women who are more likely to have children. And that's where I came in from, because I've motivated because of my children. And my impression is that it's women with children who care more than anybody, because they feel motivated by wanting the best for their children. It's interesting with the Facebook demographics that the age group and gender least represented are male teenagers. And perhaps you could say that this is the type of person who least cares about what they eat, who are least knowledgeable about what they eat. And so I want to give to anybody listening to this, I want to give you a motivation to change your diet for the better. The diet is what makes you healthy or not. And the more you can put good food into your body, the better your health is going to be. And contrary to the lack of information we have from our government about how we can not become sick, food and boosting the immune system do really make a difference. I mean, there's been lots of research about vitamin D, for example, and if you have a dark skin, you're more likely to get sick in winter. And if you protect yourself by taking a cheap vitamin D supplement, and you can supplement it with good food, avoiding ultra-processed food, you're going to boost your immune system and you're less likely to get sick. So I really want you, to anybody listening to this, to become aware of the food that you're eating, to make improvements, to make it better. And you're going to be less likely to get sick. And I think that's really important to do. And you can join our Facebook page, Safe Food NZ. You can go on our website, safefood.org.nz. And one of the important things, especially when people say, oh, I can't afford organic food, we promote organics. That's the answer. Go away from an industrial agriculture, which pollutes our planet and our bodies. You can do what we call the dirty dozen, avoid the dirty dozen. So the dirty dozen is food available in New Zealand that's less likely to have pesticide residues in it. And over a number of years, I've done research on this, and I've done this research by looking at government surveys from our Ministry for Primary Industries, the few that are done. There aren't that many done because it's expensive to analyse for pesticide residues. So I've looked at food available in New Zealand and prioritised it according to the number of pesticides found and the number of samples with pesticide residues detected. And right at the top of the list is something that's generally imported into New Zealand, and that is grapes. Second is celery, which has long been at the top of several dirty dozen lists. But generally fruit. Unfortunately, fruit is heavily sprayed with all manner of things. And in the list I gave you before, most of it was fruit. Leafy greens, salad vegetables such as tomatoes and cucumber, for example, and anything coming from grapes like raisins, sultanas, these are more likely to have pesticide residues in them. Included in this, which I mentioned before, is the anything with wheat in it. So there are lots of reasons to avoid wheat these days. A lot of people are increasingly finding that they're gluten intolerant. And there are several reasons for this. It's not just one factor, but several factors combined. But one of the reasons is the fact that in New Zealand and Australia, the grain in storage is fumigated with various insecticides. They stay in the grain.
That reminds me, what if there is no such thing as gluten intolerance? What if it's pesticide intolerance and it's triggering an allergic reaction?
Well, there is that possibility, but I think it's a combination of things. One conclusion I've come to, if we're talking about bread and the increasing intolerance to wheat, is that quite a few years ago, bakers discovered that if they fermented the bread less, it was quicker and they could do more batches and get more profit and so on. But the problem with that is that the phytase, which binds itself in the protein of the wheat grain, isn't as well developed. So there's a particular substance called phytic acid, and it means that if the more you take in, the more it rids your body of, it carries out various minerals from your body. And so it's not as good for you, whereas if it's fermented a longer time and over several batches, there's more phytase developed. So this is just one more reason, apart from the issue of pesticides, one more reason why bread may be increasingly intolerant.
That's also a friend of mine talked about this as well, that in Europe they don't have quite that problem because their bread makers have been making bread for thousands of years. And they know how to make bread. They know how to ferment it properly. And he said that the bread in New Zealand is not bread. Right? The bread in Europe, that's bread. This is not. This is.
Yeah, I remember paying a visit to the Philippines, and I was intrigued with this because the Philippines is heavily influenced by the States. And I was absolutely shocked that in their bread, white rubbery stuff, they had aspartame, the artificial sweetener in it. At least we don't have that in New Zealand. So there are some things to be grateful for in New Zealand in spite of that. In France, I have spent a little while in France, off and on, over several visits. And I remember a French friend remarking to me, "Oh, don't go to that baker because he doesn't do it properly. He doesn't do it the traditional way. Go to this baker because they do it traditionally." So France, like many other countries, and France is a country which really appreciates good food, that they tend to do it more traditionally, and you can notice it in the taste. And perhaps that's what we're lacking in New Zealand bread.
That's right. New Zealanders, you are lacking taste. Now, we have the wonderful Alison White here from safefood.org.nz. I'm going to put the website up on the screen for people, and we'll put that in the description of the show as well. Now, if there are any clips of this show, ladies and gentlemen, if you could be so kind, if you say, "Hey, Vinny, from 5 minutes to 8 minutes was a really good little kind of summation of such and such and blah, blah, blah," just put those in the little YouTube chats or in anywhere else, just those time codes there, and then we can make little clips of them, because we're having a submission next week. And it'd be nice if a few more people were informed about it by the time it goes in. Get a little bit of pressure in there. Contact your local alternative media guys if anybody wants to reach out to them on Alison's behalf. We'll have her. You just reach out to me, and I'll give you her contact details if they want to conduct an interview within this next week or even after the fact, regardless. So yeah, please guys, let's make a little bit of a group effort here, because at the end of the day, we're being poisoned. Like pretty much everybody, to a large degree, is being poisoned in some way, shape or food. Now, Muriel Watts, also a famed pesticide activist, and Alison knows her. I think she said something like, Vinny, for every pesticide we actually get banned, they've created another 700 types of pesticides that year that they've started to get into circulation that we now have to research and get. Oh my gosh. The level of work that some people do that the vast majority of their population has no idea even goes on. And you should be very grateful to people like Muriel and Alison for doing this work that you don't do. Because without them plodding along and doing their thing day in, day out, every day that you do something, every person that you awaken makes society just that little bit better. Okay? And it's that daily grind of doing the work, the real work, the magnum opus, the great work, and it's unique to every one of us, that is your inherent responsibility and your obligation to the survival of the free human race. Now I say free human race because there's no much point in survival if none of us are free, is there? Alison, thank you so much for your time tonight. safefood.org.nz is your website. Any closing remarks?
Thank you very much. It's been really good to get the message out there, because we're not often listened to, so it's really great to have that opportunity that you've given. Thank you, Vinny.
Yeah, and thank you, Mum, for passing on Alison's details to me. It's a very small country, this. And activism circles even smaller, and I've been revolving in them for about 16 years. So I'm glad that I've done what I've done for the people of this country, and I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing, Alison. Respect, just seriously. I was saying this on the show the other day. Look at all that you've done for other people. And I'm talking to the audience as well as me, as well as you, and anybody else who's really thinking about it. Look at all that you've done. Look at all that's happened to you in your life, the challenges that you've been through. Did you lose your sense of humour? Did you lose your sanity? Did you lose your conscience? Did you vacate your soul? Even though all these things have been done to you, no, you didn't. You kept contributing positively to the human family. And you should be very, very proud of yourself. And you should give yourself a bit more credit. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you, Vinny.
And thank you, ladies, gentlemen, and hermaphrodites. I'm starting to think that there's actually more of a connection into this pyroclos freaking, oh my god, the chemical names. This is a great way of concealing things from people, isn't it? Right? If you just call it Killbrain, people will be like, oh, it's Killbrain, mate. That's it's easy to remember. You know, it's like an onomatopoeia, something that sounds like what it is, you know, like pop or splash. My fellow slaves of the global plantation, the Vinny Eastwood Show is bad news. It's like the news, but so much worse. It's the lighter side of genocide. Just because we're being exterminated doesn't mean we can't enjoy it. Otherwise, what's the point of being killed? The Vinny Eastwood Show, where the only thing worse than living in a high-tech global police state run by child trafficking satanists is Vinny's jokes.